Hello, in the next episode of Oppo Stories from the NBA. I'm really honored that today we've got one of the best point guards in the NBA history, Mr. Oscar Robertson. Thank you very much for find the time for our podcast.
Gus, thank you for having me.
Usually at the beginning of my interview, I asked of the really beginnings of the journey with the basketball. And why did you choose basketball? And was it the first sport you want to practice?
Well, where I was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana, I was born in Tennessee, raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. My parents were very poor, from a very poor background. We had no money, we had nothing to do. So sports was really king. And my first love was baseball. I used to love baseball quite a bit, played baseball every day in the summers. Then what had happened in my high school, which was an all-black school, Crispus Attucks High School in Indianapolis, Indiana, started playing basketball. And my brother, Davey Robertson, got on the team, and I saw him play. So after seeing them play and the little success that they did have playing basketball at this school, I decided I wanted to play also.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the basketball, what is your best memory from, let's call it, the early basketball period? Do you got some favorite game or situation?
My early basketball I can think of as high school and pre-high school, really, because I remember playing, and when I was in the 8th grade, we won a championship. And we also won 2 championships when I got into high school in 1955 and 1956. In 1956, we went undefeated to win the championship for the state of Indiana.
Mm-hmm. And when we look at the time when you spent at the University of Cincinnati, it was 1958 to 1960 period. In each season, you won the national scoring title and averaged amazing 33.8 points per game. What were your secret of being such a successful in this aspect?
My secret was just getting open, moving, taking very good shots, because I was taught to do this when I was in high school by my coach, Ray Crow. And I just try to carry that over, try to develop my fundamentals every day and try to utilize them in a game of basketball. And I try to take good shots. And I was very fortunate to be able to take good shots, and some of them went in.
Mm-hmm. Next really important episode, it's 1960 NBA draft. You were selected by Cincinnati Royals with the first NBA pick. And in your NBA debut, you scored 21 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists. And did you feel any difference between college and NBA basketball? But because it looks like your first step in the professional basketball in the NBA was so easy.
Well, it was not so easy. The players were a little bigger, a little smarter, and these players better basketball players overall than they were in college. But I played with them all summer. I got to know them very well, and I did play a lot of basketball tournaments around the summers before I got into the pros with Cincinnati. I think that helped me quite a bit. But it was not. I had a few problems when I first started. I must tell you, it was not as easy as you think it might have been.
What were the main problems which you mentioned?
Well, some of the problems was know when to take a shot, when not to take a shot, know when to move, know when to set the right kind of pick, know when to slow the game up and know when to speed it up, and those types of things like that.
Mm-hmm. You were also first player who averaged triple-double for a season. It was 61-62 season. And it was 30.8 points, 11.4 assists, and 12.5 rebounds. What did help you to reach such incredible results?
Well, when I first got to the Cincinnati Royals, we didn't have a very good team. And so I was called on to do a lot of different things. And because of my background from high school, with the fundamentals that I did have, this is what I had to do. And I didn't realize I was doing these things, to be honestly. I didn't know anything about a triple-double whatsoever when I was playing basketball for my whole 14 years. But this is what I had to do, and that's why I tried to do it the best I could.
As myself, as a very, 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 very amateur basketball player, I'm really curious on which aspects you should focus during the game to gain triple-double, or it's a just result of tremendous, fantastic attitude on the court?
I think it's execution. I don't think you can focus on rebounds or assists or points in a situation like that. I think you got to let the flow of the game dictate as to what you should do. And which is what I try to do. I try to let the game come to me. I didn't try to force anything at all. And this way I was very successful doing that.
In the Royals, you played with future Hall of Fame players like Jack Twyman, Wayne Embry, Bob Boozer. It was a good team, but it was Boston Celtics' 8-peat time. And how do you remember rivalry with them, especially in the playoffs?
We didn't have the team to beat the Celtics, I must tell you. We didn't have the good bench. And they had better players overall than we had at Cincinnati, and this is why they won. This is why they won. They had a better management, because Red Auerbach, who was their coach, knew how to get players on the bench, veteran players who could help them win a championship, which is what he really did. But we didn't have that going into Cincinnati, and it really hurt us.
Mm-hmm. And do you also got this kind of situation, which I read in the book, that you came to the Boston Celtics, play a game in the locker room that was or too cold or too hot, and this was the psychological games that Fred Auerbach playing with the team against they playing?
Well, I guess every team tries to do something psychological to try to win a game. They can say all those things you want about mind games, psychological games, and whatnot. That has nothing to do with it. You got to toss the ball up and play. That's when you play. And if you have the ability, you got a good team, you can win. If not, you're not going to do it.
Which players you playing against were the toughest to guard, or you admire to play against them?
When I first started playing, I guess Sam Jones, Jerry West, Richie Guerin, Bob Pettit. Those are all, and Wilt Chamberlain, of course, but I didn't guard him. He was a center. But these were all very, very good basketball players in those days. Paul Arizin, they were this terrific. We only had 8 basketball teams. So you played each team like 12 or 13 times. So you got to know them very, very well.
Mm-hmm. Also, for a while, Bob Cousy was your coach in the Cincinnati Royals, but you also play as well as a player because for a while you played together. How do you remember him as a coach and a player?
As a coach and player, when Bob came to the Cincinnati Royals, he was in his 40s, so therefore the best part of his game was behind him. Bob Cousy came to Cincinnati, honestly, to try to move the team to Kansas City, Kansas. And that was his ultimate goal, to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, he had guys on the team in Cincinnati, and we were not quite aware of what they were trying to do. And Bob Cousy traded almost everybody on the team and got a new team to go to Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Now we are in the Milwaukee Bucks, your next team, and in 1971 you won an NBA championship. And how did you look your cooperation with Luan Sidor?
It was good. Alcindor was a young player, just coming on into the league. This may have been his second year, I believe. He was a player who had to learn like everybody else. We had to learn each other. Bob Dandridge, John McLaughlin, Greg Smith, who were other starters on the team. I had to get to know them. And I must say this, that I was the one who made the most sacrifices, because I wanted to get them in the game. I want them to be proficient in what they were doing. So I had to cut down some of the things that I was doing for them to achieve their goals. And it worked out very well for us.
Mm-hmm. When I talked with Terry Porter, who grew up in Milwaukee, he told me that the atmosphere which was in the city when Bucks won the NBA championship was amazing, that there was one word which could describe the atmosphere during NBA finals on the street. There was total silence. And how do you remember this series and the feast after you won the championship?
Well, I think the championship sort of sneaked upon the whole league, to be honest, because it was very, very seldom that teams from small markets won championships. Usually it was a East Coast team, Boston, Los Angeles. Then later on, in the 70s, 80s, and on up, the big cities, Chicago won a championship. But I think that the championship in Milwaukee sort of sneaked up on the people. They weren't quite aware of what it was all about until after it soaked in for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. When we look at your career from current situation perspective, you are in Hall of Fame. Were selected to the 50 greatest NBA players at the 50 NBA anniversary. 12 times played in the All-Star game. 11 times were in all NBA team. Won MVP award in 63-64 season. I've got a couple of NBA All-Star game trophies and so on and so on. Which from mentioned you are most proud of?
Well, let's see. I don't know. I guess my Olympic medal that I won in 1960 when we played in Rome. That was probably the one. The other awards were good awards, but I noticed that all the years I amassed the triple doubles and whatnot, nobody noticed it because the centers, Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell, were so dominant that they usually won the MVP awards. And no other players had an absolute chance, but I did win it in 63 or 64, I do believe. But then I think the gold medal, you know, the other medals, you know, some meant a lot, but all of the medals that came by way of the player votes mean a lot more than any other medal.
Mm-hmm. Of course, when we are looking now at the NBA, the words triple-double are really popular. And I'm really curious, did you ever think that somebody could tie it or break your record when we are talking about triple-doubles in the game?
Well, I knew it was going to happen, and I'm happy for Westbrook. I got to meet him. He's a very nice individual. The game of basketball is going to progress into the future. Each year they get better athletes, better stars coming into the game. And I think the people who come to the games really enjoy it. So it's fine. I think that Westbrook and LeBron and Curry and Beal and players like that who are playing today are the marquee players who keep people wanting to watch the game.
And also, it was really nice that you supported Russ before he tied the record and then the break. You said many kind words to him, and he also was really grateful and thank you. In the interview after this game with Atlanta Hawks, he mentioned that without you and the other players, he won't be in the place where he is. And how do you look at Russell Westbrook as a player? For sure, he is the All-Star, he is the future Hall of Famer. But from your perspective, how do you look at him?
I think Russell is a good fundamental basketball player who takes advantage of the defense. I would like the people to understand that he's a great individual as far as an individual goes, and that he really knows the game of basketball. He can almost smell certain things on the court where other players can't, which means it's fundamentally very sound. I just hope the people appreciate what he's doing with the triple doubles, and I hope they appreciate that when you set records like this, it's of MVP caliber in the game of basketball.
Mm-hmm. On Monday, I talked with sports writer Roland Lazenby about plans for the future, and I asked him that maybe some idea could be to write a book about you and Russell Westbrook, not focus only on the triple-double aspect, but to showing how the situation in the NBA changed from the 60s and 70s when you were a professional basketball player and now, because for sure there are this different environment. NBA more it's more business. There are more money. There's also more interest in the TV, and but also what is really important, I think so. There is the social and the cultural aspect. 2020 was a really tough year for the whole world, but what we, of course, from the Poland perspective saw was the situation with Black Lives Matter, with the racism, which is still deep in the society. And I'm just curious about you, who were in the 60s and 70s with a really tough year, tough times, and see it now. Do you see that it's somehow changed and we are in the different level of tolerate each other? How do you see it from the perspective? Because I guess that in 60s and 70s, it was much more different to be a basketball player than it's now.
Well, you have to understand the different times that we go through in our life. From the time I was playing, all the social issues that were around and what's going on today. You look at basketball and you look at the Oscar Robertson rule, which propelled players into rock star type situations. The money has been great because of the right of first refusal. And I think the players today are more aware of social issues, and they have more flexibility and more, I would say, courage to speak out about those things. And really what I'm trying to say is that each generation, whether you're in Poland or here in the States, you got to survive and move on. You have to overcome the things that you don't like in the past and try to make them better for the future. And I think basketball has done that.
Mm-hmm. When you look at situation in the 2020-21 season, and if you could select it All-NBA first and second team, who would you choose? Which players?
Well, I guess what they picked before was Curry guard, LeBron, AD with the Lakers. I don't know who else they picked. But it's really a game where most of the players that you look at are going to be in the top echelon of this for so many years. They're today, in this game of basketball today, there are so many all-star MVP candidates playing basketball. And there's just too many players to say, and it's really difficult to say this are the top best 5 players who are playing today. Sure, some like Curry is an outstanding shooter, good knowledge of the game. LeBron is a winner, and you have these type of players who are playing, and Beal and Russell Westbrook, of course, and people don't understand what they do, the contribution they make to the game. Yeah, because it's something, sometimes it's little things that you don't see unless you've been involved in the game itself.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Robertson, thank you very much for this conversation. From the past of the NBA to the present, and triple-double is something which make close those two periods. I'm really happy that we had opportunity to talk. And thank you very much for the time to spend for our podcast.
Thank you. You know, I want to tell you before we depart, I visited Poland a few years ago. Wrocław and Gdańsk.
Wrocław. Okay, in Gdańsk even.
Yes.
Okay.
We traveled there and played basketball with a group of players. A few years ago. It wasn't any time. It's been a few years ago. We had a lovely time.
It was close to the place where I'm living, because I live in Gdynia, which is close to Gdańsk. It's 15, 20 kilometers. So this area, this is my home place.
Very good.
Okay. Again, thank you very much, and enjoy the day.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, goodbye.